So, welcome to this episode of Menopause Conversations. I'm really smiling because look, I've got my t-shirt on again, but this couldn't be even more special because it's to do with this wonderful human being in front of me, Diane Danzebrink. Welcome to Menopause Conversations.
Amantha, thank you very much for inviting me and for wearing your t-shirt.
As I said to Diane, listen, you'll be doubly impressed. It's not just one, I've got two. I've got this one in white as well, because actually Diane is the founder of the hashtag Make Menopause Matter campaign. And if you've been under a rock for some time, then now's the time to come out, because Diane is someone who is a grassroots supporter. She's been campaigning for the rights of menopausers for a long time, and it's an absolute privilege to have the time to interview you today, Diane. So
thank you, lovely.
Oh, thank you. Tell us a little bit about you, Diane Danzebrink. What is it that you are all about? Tell us a little bit about you.
What is it that I'm all about? Okay, so if I start by telling you sort of how I got here.
Great.
So we're going back 10 years almost now. About 10 years ago, I had to have surgery, which put me into a surgical menopause. Now, until the time that I was about to have that surgery, I'd never heard that term. So surgical menopause, for those people that don't know, is when both of the ovaries are removed at the same time. Sometimes that's alongside the womb and the cervix. Other times the womb is left. But in my case, it was everything. It was both of my ovaries, womb and my cervix. So sort of clinically, that's called a bilateral oophorectomy. So having both of my ovaries removed at the same time, I knew I would be in menopause. But for me, menopause meant having no more periods because my womb was being removed, and having maybe some hot flushes, but that was all I knew. And none of the clinical team that I had met prior to my surgery had sat down with me and explained that there could be 30 plus symptoms of menopause, and some of them could be cognitive and psychological. So I had no clue about that. So I had my surgery. I'd heard all the scary stuff about HRT. And I thought, oh, do you know what? Hot flushes, no more periods. I'll be all right. I'll look after myself. I'll go and see a nutritionist, which I did after surgery. So I had no information after surgery either. As I say, I'd heard all the scary stories about HRT and just thought, oh, no, I'll do exercise, I'll be healthy, etc., etc. And for the first few weeks, I was okay. And then it all started to go horribly wrong, because in ways that I did not connect with my surgery in any way, shape or form, because my mental health started to deteriorate. So I started to have increased levels of anxiety. I got to the point where I was so anxious that I didn't want to leave the house to walk my dogs in the morning, which used to be one of my favorite things in the world. And I'm pleased to say now still is. I was becoming less and less likely to answer the telephone. I didn't really want to see people. And when it got to its very worst, I wouldn't even open post because I was so scared about what was going to be in the letters. And I had no reason to feel like that, but I had become completely irrational. Obviously, I didn't realize that at the time, but I had become completely irrational. My sleep had fallen apart. I was having heart palpitations. I was spending a lot of time in tears. And I'll fast forward because it's quite a long story. But long story short, my husband and my mum tried repeatedly to get me to go back and see a GP. But by this time, I was absolutely terrified that it would either be a lifetime of antidepressant medication or I would be taken into a mental health unit because I felt like I was going mad. And it reached the point where I just felt completely useless, hopeless and worthless, and came very close to taking my own life. It was at that point that my husband kind of swept in and took over and actually booked an appointment with a GP on my behalf. And she saw me the same day. And she was the first medical health professional to explain to me that having my ovaries removed had given me a drastic reduction in estrogen. And that's why I was experiencing the mental health symptoms that I was experiencing. She also explained that HRT was not nearly as scary as all the headlines that I'd read in the past, and that actually it was definitely on balance for me. Being under the age of natural menopause, it was definitely the right way to go. I could have my estrogen transdermally through my skin. I didn't have to have a tablet, etc. And I actually started my patches, which I still use. I started them that day. And within, I'm always a bit concerned about saying this, because I never want people to think that it's magic and it's an overnight success, because it so isn't for many people. It takes months to titrate correctly. But within a few days, the deep, dark hole that I'd felt that I was in, that I was never going to get out of, didn't seem as though it was quite so deep and dark anymore. And once I did feel a little bit better, I started to research. So as we all do, I turned to the internet, and I was really horrified to find chat rooms full of people saying things like, I feel like I'm going mad. I don't know who I am anymore. I feel so alone, etc., etc. And I remember turning to my husband one day and saying, how can this possibly be allowed? We're half the population, and yet there are clearly thousands and thousands, if not millions of people out there suffering in silence. If I ever feel like me again, I'm going to make damn sure I do something to change it. And that's how I get to sit here. It all happened, we're talking about, this was sort of 2013. So it probably took me 2 years to really feel back to myself.
Yeah.
But once I did, what I'd done in that intervening period is I'd done some more psychotherapy training. So I'd done counselling training many, many years before. I did professional nurse training in menopause, and I started to counsel women one-to-one. But it became very obvious very quickly that I was not going to make the impact that I wanted to doing that. So I started Menopause Support to share as much factual, evidence-based information as possible. I then started a Facebook community, which now supports 28,000 women. And in 2018, I launched the national Make Menopause Matter campaign on your lovely T-shirt. So the campaign has 3 very clear aims. And the aims were basically drawn from all the information that I had gathered in sort of the preceding 3 years. And it had become so clear that our GPs do not have education about menopause across the board. Some have a little bit, some have absolutely none. It's clear that our medical students are not being educated about menopause across the board. It was also clear that a lot of women were leaving the workplace due to their menopause symptoms, which is tragic for them as individuals, but also the loss of talent to their employer. And then finally, the idea of us all learning about menopause before it comes along. So I wanted to do something around education. So the third aim was to have menopause included in the new RSE curriculum. And as I say, I launched the campaign in Westminster in October 2018. And by July 2019, the then Education Secretary had announced that from September 2020, menopause would be on the curriculum in England. So that was amazing. So we're part of the way there with education. We still want to see that happen throughout the UK.
Yeah.
Things are definitely starting to improve in the workplace. I speak to more and more businesses and organizations every month than I ever have, doing training, etc. And as far as our GPs are concerned, there is definitely a move in the right direction, but we need that to be very much across the board. So that's me, lovely.
Wow, I mean, it's just so fantastic, isn't it? I mean, it is the classic, you know, we've got that extra adversity gene, haven't we? That, you know, when we're faced with that adversity, every woman I've spoken to, probably like you, Diane, you know, there's real strength within. I mean, we're really tested, aren't we? But we do have the carry on gene, as I call it, that we sort of just keep carrying on, and it has to get really bad. I mean, what is it the statistic says? On average, a woman will have 8 symptoms, and it will take sort of 14 months before she connects the dots on all of those. So you're absolutely right. And the focus that we're now getting, and that noise of the drum beating, you know, those pictures that we saw last year, just like, you know, amazing in Parliament Square, and, you know, as you say, the task force. I mean, it's not without its frustrations though, is it? You know, because let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is we've got a lot of bandwagoners, haven't we? You know, people who jump on the bandwagon. It's all great when it's Menopause Awareness Month. We have lots of announcements from lots of key people, and then those things don't pan out. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about the prescriptions, aren't we? So let's talk about that, and then let's talk about HRT shortages at the moment, shall we?
Yeah, so as you say, there was the rally in October last year, which many of us attended. And that rally was called because Carolyn Harris MP, who had created this menopause all-party parliamentary group, had got the opportunity to create a bill, and it was the Menopause Support and Services Bill. And what she decided to do with that was to ask the government to make hormone replacement therapy free. So this was the day that the bill was essentially going to get its sort of next reading, and there would be response from the government in the House. So the government minister speaking was an MP called Maria Caulfield, who's in the Department of Health. She's the Minister for Primary Care and Patient Safety. And her response to Carolyn's request was that the government couldn't make it free, but they would make it one single prescription charge for 12 months of hormone replacement therapy. And it was announced, and then, you know, they all came out of Westminster. There was lots of media there was lots of cheering, etc., etc. But the way that it was announced made it sound as if it was going to happen imminently. So we then were inundated with emails and messages saying, okay, when is this happening? When can I get my HRT for one fee? And of course, nothing moves quick in government. You know, you've got government, you've got NHS together. This has to be sort of fed across the entire network. So my thinking was it would probably be part of this year's budget because it's a financial thing. And then, of course, there was the announcement that actually it's not going to be happening until April 2023, which was disappointing in itself, but more disappointing that it was announced in the House at a meeting that Carolyn and Maria were at. And these two women are co-chairs of the new menopause task force. So one sitting government MP, one opposition MP. And the disappointing thing was that Carolyn knew nothing about it. That was the first she'd heard of it. And for me, my take on that is, does that really bode well for a task force when essentially you haven't got the two co-chairs communicating? So that's I mean, that's not just my concern. A lot of people have said that, you know, sort of surely the right thing would have been for Carolyn to have been briefed beforehand, which of course it would have been. Add to that the fact that we have severe HRT shortages at the moment. So one of the gels, one of the sprays, one of the patches, one of the gels, that's probably sort of the biggest issue. But with one brand of the patches goes in and out of stock all the time. It's a consistent issue. But now pressure is being put on other brands of product because those things are out of stock. So not only can people not have them for a single prescription fee for 12 months, but also they now can't get them at all. And that is causing real anxiety. You know, I've literally spoken to people who they're losing sleep over it. They're in tears over it during the day. They're actually scared to go to their pharmacist and say, have you got my prescription? Because they're so worried they're going to say no. And it's not as easy as, oh, well, you can't have that one, have this one. It's not as easy as that.
No.
It's the same with any medication. They might all have similar components, but you can't just swap over. And if you think, a lot of these women are anxious anyway, so this just compounds the anxiety. So then we had this kind of, okay, let's all contact the Department of Health.
Yes.
Let's contact Maria Caulfield. Let's find out what's going on. So you all contact the Department of Health, and what do you get back? You get back a standard issue reply, which basically makes people feel, well, you're not listening to us anyway, so why are we bothering? I mean, frankly, the response from the Department of Health on this has been absolutely woeful. To think that this is affecting so many people. I think somebody said there was a tweet recently that Maria Caulfield was going to be speaking to the pharmaceutical companies. Well, actually, lots of us at grassroots have been doing that for years. So yes, you're the minister, crack on, and then tell us what they say. The trouble is, do you ever get the truth? Do you ever know what's really happening, you know, between the pharmaceutical companies, the wholesalers, and the Department of Health? Are women on the ground ever going to really get the truth? And my guess is probably not. No.
And that's what's really, I mean, having worked in the pharmaceutical industry myself, you know, we spoke a little bit offline, and for people that don't know, I did used to sell HRT the first time around, and you know, we've got Brexit complicating things as well, you know, so is it ingredients coming from abroad? You know, it's hellish trying to get stuff from Europe in, but actually just being open and fully disclosing would go a long way to helping the frustration, wouldn't it? And I did see some 100%. Exchanges between Carolyn Harris and Maria Caulfield, and I mean, that wasn't great, you know, because actually there's a frustration, and you know, people are naturally feeding in with the advent of social media. You know, our MPs are much more, well, some of them are more accessible to us, like you know, Carolyn Harris, but others aren't. They're keeping their distance, and that just alienates large swathes of people. Because coming back to what you said about the time lag, it's a fallacy if people think, oh yeah, we'll put you on HRT for 3 months and then we'll review you. Often that's not enough time for someone to reach their optimal states with it. You know, we're spoon fed, oh, normal levels are X. Yeah, but my normal and their that normal could be
might not be the same.
Different. So we're talking about suboptimal dosing and getting you to the right dose, and that can take, on average, 9 to 12 months for someone.
Absolutely.
Oh, and then find out your HRT is not available, so we've got to switch you.
Absolutely.
I don't think so.
Absolutely. And as I say, the, you know, kind of this idea of, oh, well, just swap to something else. And it's sort of, actually, you're dealing with a really anxious person who has just started to feel a bit better. The last thing they want to do, I mean, it really undermines the situation and that individual completely. So yeah, it's very tricky. And the last thing we want to see is, you know, sort of those people who are supposed to be working on our behalf, arguing online.
Tit for tat. It's not professional, and it's not, no. and it doesn't cry confidence, does it?
It really doesn't, lovely. No, what we want is factual information. And actually, even if that's not good news, it's just good to have it.
Yeah.
Because as you know, as human beings, what we want is information, because otherwise it makes us anxious.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And even, I mean, I think I actually messaged you on an Instagram post saying that, you know, I don't think there's enough detail around that whole prescription thing either. You know, I mean, I'm on 5 different products, Diane, for, you know, every cream and potion and lotion going, and I need all of them. So actually, how's that going to affect me? You know, am I going to have to pay 5 single charges for the year? You know, it's gone radio silence, hasn't it?
Yeah, and it's really
largely.
interesting what they've said about the single charge, because the single charge is going to be £18 something a year. So if you're somebody who only uses one product, well, that's not a single charge.
No.
Because a single charge would be £9.35, not £18.70. So basically, they've calculated it on somebody who is on two products or a combined product that attracts two charges.
Yes.
Then, as you say, what happens if you have, sort of local estrogens or additional products?
Yes.
How does that work? There's been very little detail, and that sort of leads me to believe that detail was not worked out before the announcement was made, which did exactly what it was supposed to do, grab the headlines.
Yeah.
But then actually that leaves all those of us who work in this area every day to try and pick up the pieces to help all those women who are desperately searching around for information. It's just been really poor, the whole thing.
It's really poor. But what we can say is, for those of you that can afford to get a prepayment certificate, you will save some money there. So do look into that. You can get that 3 months or a year. I mean, someone like me, I got my money back pretty much within 2 months. But
particularly if you're on multiple products. Absolutely.
So there is something you can do there. And in terms of, let's talk a little bit. I mean, some of the things that your organisation, a community interest company, actually provides. It's that GP education. You're empowering women, supporting the workplace, because that's the next big thing, isn't it? I speak to large organisations every single week, and they're all now ramping up with their menopause policy and guidance and their awareness. I mean, how excited are you about that? I mean, we want that to be more than a tick box exercise, right? So what does great look like in your eyes, Diane, when you think about that?
100% lovely. It absolutely has to be more than a tick box exercise. So, sort of, we are, as you said, we're a community interest company. We're very much, obviously, a not-for-profit organisation. So obviously we have to make money because we're a business. But if we do make any profit, then that gets sort of goes back into things like our resources, etc. So we try and make as many resources as possible available for free. As I said, we run the fully moderated group for 28,000. That's free. But as far as the workplace is concerned, I think it is really encouraging, because I think this is the one part of this, education needed legislation. GP education will need intervention from the Royal Colleges, from the medical schools, etc., etc. But I think the really interesting thing about the workplace is that the raising of awareness and the amount of talk and media there's been around this, and also women themselves, sort of taking this to their managers, their HR departments, that has been quite organic. And I think that is really exciting, that, sort of, we do have managers, we do have business owners, we do have CEOs, directors, etc. going, actually, they're right. This is a common sense way to go, because we have lost good people from the business. And if we'd have known how to support, and my approach to this is always, there's no point looking back at what we didn't do and complaining. We have to look forward and look at what we can do. And I think there are some really simple things. So I think, sort of, good practice is about an awful lot more than coming up with a policy and publishing it.
Yes.
Because this is all about culture. So this is not just, we're talking about culture throughout the entire population, essentially, and how we view menopause, and also how we view women getting older. That's also a big part of this conversation, and the value that we place on them, and historically what that value hasn't been. So I think, sort of, is it worth having a policy? Potentially it's worth having a policy if you've put the things in place to make that policy worthwhile. So everybody within an organization needs education.
Yeah.
And I don't mean in great depth. I mean a basic understanding of the what, when, why of menopause, what those hormones are doing, how they can affect an individual, how an individual can help to support themselves, and importantly, how you as a colleague, a line manager, a business owner can help to support members of your team. But it's also about making it visible within the workplace. So whether that's about having posters on the back of all your loo doors, whether that's about making it public on your intranet, whether that's about having a menopause support group in the workplace. I mean, the simplest idea, but the most powerful resource.
Yeah.
And about having a menopause champion. A menopause champion is usually somebody who's really suffered themselves and they don't want to see their colleagues go through it.
Yeah.
They don't have to be professionally trained in anything. They just have to be understanding, compassionate, empathetic, and be a great signposter. That's really all that's required. And then if you've got those things in place, then you can start to think about policy. But just saying, well, we're doing great and we've signed up to X and we've got a policy, it's like, yeah, and what does that mean in practice?
Yeah, because I sort of come back to, you get various trades that are affiliated to various organizations, and we all know how it works. You pay your money, you get your badge.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan. So
no, me either, lovely. No, me either. And that's why we don't operate such a system.
Yeah, and there are such organizations out there, but I think you're absolutely right. I had the pleasure of speaking to the head of HR at Santander yesterday, and she was so refreshing. You know what she said? You can do menopause awareness for very little cost.
You can.
And I thought that was so inspirational. She said,
we've
got the internet. We've got
the
internet. She said, so lose the thought that this is an expensive budgetary strain. It's not.
100%, lovely. It doesn't have to cost thousands of pounds.
No, and your
website
really
doesn't.
And I put your website on my resources because I say, look, that's somewhere you should go to. That's a really good access point. So you're at, it's not complicated unless we make it complicated.
It's not, but the thing is, there are, as you rightly said, there are great resources. You've got the CIPD, Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. They have amazing resources. And okay, maybe you do feel that, it would be nice to have some kind of collective, you might want to get everybody on unfortunately now it does all tend to be on Zoom and Teams.
Yeah.
Gone are the days when I used to go into organizations and do these things face to face, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But the good thing about Zoom and Teams is that it does allow probably people from offices around the country all to come in on the same thing, which saves money, which is great. And obviously everybody at the moment, doesn't matter what organization you're in, everybody's looking at budgets, fresh year as far as budgets are concerned, everybody's going to be looking at them. But it really doesn't, there isn't some sort of magic formula. It is essentially about education, information, guidance, and most importantly, support.
Yes.
The thing that matters the most to menopausal women is knowing you have support, knowing that support is ongoing, and knowing that there can be flexibility. They are the absolutely key aims.
Absolutely. And what she sort of finished with for me, which is, I think, really that focal point that menopause is a workplace issue. It's not a gender issue. It's not an ageism issue, but actually not forgetting the partners that it affects. And like you, Diane, I've just been so privileged to have someone who stuck by the roller coaster of emotional outbursts, shall we put it like that, the not knowing whether you're coming or going syndrome, and just wanting to walk off into the sunset because I felt like I was no use to anybody, and the guilt that would always come with that too. So we mustn't forget the partners, must we? And more and more I'm seeing, I tried to have a men's group, actually, I share with you. That didn't work. and no surprises, but it was useful for me to know. And the reason most of the guys said they didn't want to come into a group, but they did want to come into one-to-ones, is because they feel terrified by the prospect of the subject.
You know, that's so interesting, because Tuesday I ran an all-male session for it. I mean, it's a client, to be fair, it's a client that I've been working with for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So we've done lots of sort of general understanding, Q&As, mental health and menopause, etc. But they came to me and said, we'd really like to do something just for men, because our male colleagues have asked, and they want it to be just for men, so that they don't feel as though they're going to step on anybody's toes.
And you know what? That's so wonderful to hear. And I have really enjoyed, my experience has been, it's a different conversation.
It is.
Isn't it? Isn't it?
It is. Absolutely.
What do you take for that? Because people watching this, I know a lot of guys check in the social media, they may not comment, they may not even like it, but they're all ghosting and watching and learning. What can we say to more guys? Because every guy that turned up for one of my one-to-ones said, I'm going to tell my mates and I'm going to get them to come along to something like this. But what do you think's holding partners back? And not just men, but, you know, women supporting women. What's holding partners back?
I think it is, you know, kind of, I think whoever you are, I think if you're not going through it, and you know, so as you rightly say, you know, kind of, you could be a female partner supporting your female partner, but she might have got to menopause before you have, so you equally have little knowledge. But I think, you know, sort of, for certainly the men that I've spoken to, and as I say, you know, kind of, we did this session the other day, it is this fear of, it's the fear of saying the wrong thing. And I think particularly in the workplace, there is a real fear. So it's slightly different with their own partner, but in the workplace, I think there is a real fear of tackling it at all, because they are really worried that they're going to upset somebody, they're going to say the wrong thing. And I've often said, you know, kind of, I do end up sounding a bit like a broken record, because this is all about education. It's not just about empowering those that go through it, it's also about empowering everybody. Because whether you're a partner, a friend, a family member, a colleague, we will all know somebody during our lifetime that's going to go through menopause. In fact, we're probably going to know quite a lot of people who go through it. And some of them may have no symptoms, but you may have a couple who have a really challenging time. And I think the more we understand, the better we are at saying, actually, have you thought of this, without feeling, gosh, I hope I haven't said the wrong thing. So I think it's about empowering everybody with the right knowledge, the right information. And as I say, it doesn't have to be in technical detail. It's, you know, sort of, when I say it's simple stuff, what I mean is, it's things that we should all have been taught a long time ago. But unfortunately, you know, sort of, as far as the curriculum was concerned, it was periods, pregnancy, you're done.
Oh yeah, completely. You know, we contraceptualize you, we medicalize you from the beginning to the end, and then by the end we just go, over to you, let you do. I mean, and one of the things that I sort of think is, you know, the mental health landscape is a lot further on, isn't it, than menopause, but it's not going to be difficult to reclaim the same sort of landscape for menopause. So as we sort of draw things to a close, I mean, I could just talk to you forever, but I know you're so in demand. But what are your hopes for the future, Diane, when you think about, you know, let's imagine you and I meet up for a coffee at some stage in a couple of years' time. Where do you hope we are in a couple of years' time?
So I would love, in a couple of years' time, I would love to see every secondary school having menopause embedded in their RSE curriculum. And the reason I say in a couple of years' time is because it came at the worst time for teachers and schools. It came smack bang in the middle of COVID. And, you know, those poor people were desperately trying to make sure that all their students had the right equipment to learn at home.
Yeah.
So the last thing that they could be thinking about was, oh, well, let's think about menopause. But I hope that it is, in a couple of years' time, it is truly embedded, you know, as a half an hour or 40-minute module in an RSE session. Doesn't need to be more than that. Again, it's simple stuff, you know, with some clear takeaways. Secondly, I hope that we continue to see the interest in menopause that we're seeing in the workplace flourish. And I hope that we see lots more of the smaller employers, because at the moment, it's very much kind of the corporates that are recognizing that this is, you know, they have lots of employees. This is something that's really important for them to look at. But I hope we see that filter down, you know, sort of through all sizes of organization, so that there is that understanding there, and that we're not losing the talent that we're currently losing from the, you know, it is really sad, and costly too. You know, sort of in practical terms, it's also costly. And in a couple of years' time, well, I would think that the menopause APPG must be coming to the point this year where it's going to produce a report. And I'm very much hoping that that report is going to have some key action points. We now have this menopause task force, which is supposed to run for 18 months from January. So, you know, by the middle of next year, we should also have a report there. And actually, not just some key action points, but we should have seen some action. That's really what I want to see. The key to this is to have better public information. So I have lobbied many times for a public health campaign financed by the government, because it would save time, money for the NHS, for individuals, for businesses, for organisations. In national terms, it's not an expensive thing to do. But I would also like to see those stakeholders who can truly make a difference to GP education get round a table. And again, this is not difficult. This is the frustration, Amantha, with all of this is not rocket science. You know, there are simple things that could be done to change this. I would like to see those stakeholders get round a table and commit to making a change and ensuring that we upskill all of our GPs and that we educate all of our coming medical healthcare professionals, all of our medical students for the future, because it is just a common sense strategy, which will stop half of the population potentially going through a stage of their lives where they don't feel supported. It's really as simple as that.
Absolutely. Take note, Devon CCG, you need to be getting a menopause clinic for us. So, you know, it's absolutely those sorts of things. And so, Diane, I want to dedicate this episode to all the grassroots supporters. I want to dedicate it to the celebrities. I want to dedicate it to the MPs. I want to dedicate this episode to anyone who's prepared to use their voice to make menopause matter, because we need to pull together, don't we?
100%.
We need to really pull together. And so how can people get in touch with you? Because I bet people would want to know more about you. How can they be in touch with you?
Okay, so our email address at the office is hello@menopausesupport.co.uk. The website is menopausesupport.co.uk. You'll find lots of free resources there. Please make use of them.
It's brilliant.
That's why we created them. And then you can follow me on Instagram. You can find me easily. There's only one Diane Danzebrink in the country. Lots of people will breathe a sigh of relief at that. And I would also love you very much if you would go and not just sign the Make Menopause Matter campaign, if it's something you feel you can support, but also share it amongst both your personal and professional communities online. Because as Amantha rightly said, this is about raising not my voice, this is about raising a collective voice. You know, yes, I started the campaign, but this is very much the public grassroots campaign. And it's really important that we have an independent grassroots campaign that is essentially the voice of the people. So yeah, please do get involved with that. We would love it.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely brilliant. And my final thank you goes to all the menopausers out there. Makes me feel quite emotional, actually, because they're such strong people, aren't they, having to really battle through stuff. So to them, because they're the people that keep the social media going, they're the people that keep interacting. And Diane, you're so generous with your time. I see you all the time coming onto Instagram saying, hello, lovelies, just updating you on. And you know what, we need that compassion and that kindness. So thank you for all that you do, and I feel really privileged to have had the chance to speak to you. So thank you so much, Diane. For now,
thank you, lovely, my absolute pleasure.
Thank you.